Okay, so just sit comfortably. If you can for a few moments and your back's okay with this, just sit forwards on your chair so that you get the feeling of the real support for your body coming through your feet and legs and your hips. Obviously, as I've said many times before, when you feel uncomfortable with this, it is a strong position for your back, because although you're slightly angled forwards, you're thinking about the support through your spine and so on. When it gets too much, sit back in your chair for a little bit of extra support. Most chairs, you'll find that if you go back, you can still keep your weight slightly forwards and just have a bit of support for the back, for the lower part of your back, and that's usually sufficient to just sort of reduce some of the strain on your back. But if it still aches, you can't. I mean, just take a pit stop. Just sit back, rest your back for a while. But try the forward position. It's a good position to get used to. Just rubbing your hands together. And then tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. The other side. Arch your chest. Your belly. And finally your legs. Lovely. So change your position, feet out, drop back into the chair in a reclining position. Give yourself a few moments to get one of the sort of basic feelings that we want to bring into everything that we do, which is this releasing feeling. And this kind of takes it to an extreme, because there's no structure to hold here. You can just melt into the chair. Notice the effect on things like your breathing, and also a sense of suddenly feeling heavier in the chair, perhaps. So, these are conditions that really encourage that dropping of our weight, the rooting down. And coming back up to the upright position, trying to keep some of that feeling with you. So certain aspects, and it's not going to be the same. You're not just relaxing in that sense, but you're trying to retain that feeling of dropping down, of not straining in your body. You weight a little bit forwards, about a third of your weight in your feet, again with that slight angling in your back. And a stronger feeling in your feet and legs, coming up into your hips and lower back and up to your shoulders. The feeling that the front of your body is supported enough to, again, just enable that feeling of releasing, and the subsequent effect on things like your breathing. It'll be all the internal processes that benefit from this. I think breathing is probably the most obvious of those, but you might, for instance, notice a greater sense of circulation, maybe a tingling in your fingers, that kind of thing. The absence of those doesn't mean it's not working by the way. It's just that certain things sometimes make themselves known to us. And then in this position, slowly turning your head. Trying to move in such a way that you maintain this feeling within your body. And that allows for a very smooth, fluid movement, very restful and calming, a very easing movement. So there's something that is going to help you to release tightness and stiffness in the parts of the body where you feel the movement. Not only in the muscles, but also the effect on the nervous system is very soothing, very calming. And then hands in front of your shoulders. And going forwards. And down to your side, rotating your arms. Winding all the way around. And back the other way. And rest your hands. Tilting your pelvis forward so more of your weight goes into your feet. And then back. So several different ways that we can look at this movement, and they're complementary rather than contradictory. And I suppose you could say that different ways are slightly more advanced in some ways, but it depends on what's actually useful to you at the time. No image, no idea is ever going to be complete, remember. So you could just think in terms, at its most basic really, that from here, you're going to push your feet down into the floor and push your head and the shoulders up. Maybe complementing that with that feeling of a pull-in from your hips. You could think of your legs as springs so that as your weight goes in, they get sort of compressed and then naturally expand, and that pushes your feet into the ground and your shoulders back. You could imagine there's a big ball, like one of these balls, big balls you find in gyms, and as you go forwards, you're leaning into it, and then the ball itself expands. But those last two images are quite good because there's less ordinary effort involved in this. It's not, the push down through your legs is useful but limited, I think, in its application. Whereas this becomes a sort of almost automatic thing, and the expansion is in both directions, downward and upward. So you retain that sense of connection to the ground. And finally, and I suppose you could argue this is the most advanced way, it's the most internalized way. We actually feel the movement within the body. We imagine the ball is now inside the body, in the lower part of the body, in belly, between sort of hips and waist. And so in any position, and this is an obvious position because you're going forwards and you can feel the compression there. But even if you weren't going forwards, still the weight of your head and the weight of your body pressing down will produce that expansive response. So wherever we are in the movement, whatever the position in the chair, there's the potential both for the yielding and for the expanding aspect of each movement. So ultimately, I suppose that's a more complete image than some of the others. And then just turn to one side. And then in the other direction. And go around. And back the other way. Come back to the center, and then push one foot out, heel down, and then the toes, and back. Making sure you don't step so far that you've strained in your knee or the rest of your leg, so good contact with the ground. And then the other foot. So those things, whichever image you're using for the movements and just the feelings that you're generating are really common to all of the exercises that we do. Other sort of like sensations and sort of patterns of movement as we look into the body are going to be more associated with a particular set of exercises. So there's both a common thread between all of the exercises, but also a diversity of from one exercise to another. So we want to really establish what is common to all the movements in the first instance, and because really they're also the things that you're going to take out the class with you and use in your everyday life. But one of the advantages of having the other movements, apart from the fact that they're often very lovely movements, of course, and that they will work different parts of particularly your upper body, is that we get a practice to maintain these basics on a kind of subconscious level, whilst well occupied with a particular exercise, a particular idea, doing the washing up, walking down the road, whatever, so that they become part and parcel of the foundation of how we do everything. So we weight back in your hips, turn your hands palm forwards, bird folds its wings. And then leaving your hands facing back, fisherman cast the net. Now, from this position here, imagine the ball underneath your arms coming back. Either think in terms of your arms and hands sliding over the ball, or something slightly stronger that you're rolling the ball in. So if your hands are sliding over the ball, it's just very slippery. But there's a certain, if you're rolling the ball in, there's a certain amount of resistance to the movement. And if it was one of these big rubber balls, again, that you get in gym, plastic balls, you'd have to just sort of like press your fingertips in a little bit, wouldn't you? The palms of your hands. Now, pigeon spreads its wings, hands palm in, chest opening and closing. And then push and wave. Notice the shape of my arm, and the movement forward produces the wave that pushes your hands forwards. But because they're still attached to your shoulder, you're not just going to disappear out in front. You're going to just naturally curve up. One more time. And then hands loosely fisted. Trying to pay attention to as many of the details as you can sort of absorb and embrace. One more time. Now open up your fingers so you can turn your hands palm out more smoothly, winding back in. Press forwards. Now this time come back, change into polishing the table. Turn with your hips dropping back in the chair. Angle forwards in your pelvis and just feel how your body's responding. One more time. As you come back. And both hands palm up, pushing up, doing the expansion up and down your back this time, pressing down. Pushing up and press down. The body lengthening and contracting. Then, wild goose. Turning your hands out, not a bird in flight, or so you're just waving a feather up and down in the air. Just aware of that little sense of resistance. Expanding, contracting. And then easing forward, parting the clouds. You come back into your hips and push up. They're slightly different to the last two because there's this little bit of a forward movement here. And then you come back from here on, it's the same in your hips, low abdomen, the movement, the expansion coming up. We go forwards just to allow the hand to pass in front of our knees. We come back and then we push up. Okay, let your hands drop down. Your arms and hands should feel quite heavy hanging from your shoulders. Now it's dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Notice it's my elbow that moves first, which begins to pull my fingers up, as though my fingers are stuck in mud. I'm having to pull them out. And that movement is an outcome of the gentle pressing down through feet and hips. If I exaggerate, maybe you can just see how my head goes up and my arm follows that. That was quite exaggerated. It's not a movement you would normally see easily, I think. Let's do one more on each side. And then changing both hands again, pushing in two directions. The first direction is up, nice long feeling through your back and contracting. And then pushing out to the sides and back. Again. One more round of this. Extend one foot, scooping the sea, looking at the sky. So trying to keep your back in line, so shoulders stay in line with your hips, so that you're tilting forwards from your hips, What you don't want to do is this, to sort of bend forwards. So it's like your head is going in that direction. And the same when we change to grasping the tiger's ears. See how my head goes forwards and up. And what we want to do with grasping the tiger's ears, loosely fist your fingers, and first of all have your arms down like this. So this is almost like a version of an earlier movement, bird folds its wings, except that our fingers are curled in, and we're going further forward because our foot is out. But this is the basic action in grasping the tiger's ears. And what we do here, because the head is going forwards and up, it tends to draw our arms forwards and up. And gradually, without straining your shoulders, it can be quite a strong movement. Our arms can get higher. The highest point being sort of in line with our own ears, but maybe not that high. So with scooping the ceiling and looking at the sky, you've got that same effect of the back lengthening, but slightly angled downwards. Here, we've got the angle upwards. One more time. So, changing to your other foot. So first of all, scooping the sea, looking at the sky. And then grasping the tiger's ears. One more time. Still moving your weight forwards and backwards. And this time, just rehearsing the pattern of weight change for Hark the Wild Horse's mane. So when you come back this time, bring your weight to your right hip, take a diagonal line forwards, feel your body turning towards your left knee, and then back. So that's the first diagonal. Move across with a little bit of a turn to your left hip. Do the same thing to your right hip, to your right leg, I mean. And notice that if I exaggerate, this is very exaggerated. Like to start off with, it's like I'm pushing into something with my shoulder and I turn into the movement. This is very exaggerated, by the way. You probably wouldn't get this bigger movement. You hold your hands in front of you, elbows lightly against your sides. You can feel your arms beginning to respond. Now turn your hands palm in so the fingers are pointing towards each other. Now what you'll feel is shoulder and then the elbow going first, and that's followed by your hand as you turn. So we get this movement unfolding. Really, it comes from your hips and the movement of your weight into the shoulder, elbow, and then hands and fingers. So it's like if you were to get a scarf or a piece of string and kind of flick it out, it would work all the way along the length of the scarf or string, rather than just by your fingers or just at the end. So now we have a movement that really engages the whole of the body. I said the hip, but also the movement of your weight and your legs. They're all engaged with the movement somehow. And then this time, as you go forwards, same thing. Finally, your hand swings out, and then coming back, hold the ball, move across. So part in the wild horse's mane. At the end of each extending movement, the ideal position for your hand is above your knee, above your foot, fingers pointing away from your shoulder and at about shoulder height, which means that at the end of the movement here, what you're doing is you're looking out towards the horizon across your fingers. One more to each side. So that unfolding that I described, feet to hips to shoulder to elbow and so on, is a characteristic of all of the movements. But I think part of the wild horse's mane really demonstrates this quite nicely. And then just let your hands come to rest. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. And just again, try and feel that sense of your whole body, from a slight pressure just behind the balls of your feet, up through your legs to your hips, up through the length of your back and that sort of slightly dropping feeling in the front of your body. The weight of your head just resting nicely on top of your shoulders, so the weight of your head goes down through your body. Breathing slowly and gently. Okay, just opening your eyes and once again rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder, your arm. On the shoulder, your arm. Up after the chest. Your belly. And your legs. Now pushing your heels up. You may even notice a slight response from the rest of your body, maybe a bit of a rocking movement to this. When one part of your body is in motion, your whole body is in motion. Your whole body is one unit. And we often feel it in a very fragmented way, I think. And then going around in a circle. So one of the I think one of the great benefits from Tai Chi practice is that it helps us smooth out that fragmentation. In computer terms, it defragments everything. It sort of brings body and mind together in a very sort of cooperative, harmonious way. Go back in the other direction. Okay. Then standing. That sense of your whole body in movement leads to that real smoothness of movement. And your body's, when body and mind are moving as one unit, the flow is generated quite naturally. And that effect has a very calming and a very soothing effect on the body. For instance, you could imagine it just sort of almost massaging the nervous system, or those joints that are maybe a bit painful or something like that. They sometimes say that Tai Chi is like an internal massage. We use phrases like the organs, the internal organs and tissues being bathed in energy, and so on and so forth. So these kind of ideas start to take on some kind of reality as we become used to the movements and less concerned with this is what the arms are doing, but more aware of what our whole body is actually doing. So just standing, weight forwards, hips dropping back. In the chair, more of our weight is back in our hips. Standing, more of the weight is towards the front of the feet. And then dropping your hips back a little bit more and pushing up, and just see if you can feel that rise in movement, expanding movement coming up from your legs, from the ground, through your belly, solar plexus and chest. Again, different ways we can think of this. Pushing into the ground with the feet, loading the legs as though they were springs, as though we were straddling a ball, or as though the ball were here within the body, between the hips and waist, in that area of the center. So I favour the last one, 2 reasons. One, because it means that I'm not trying to push myself up. I'm just allowing myself to sink. And having sunk, then the expansion seems to happen if I'm prepared to just wait for it. And secondly, because it generates the movement, the rhythm of expansion and contraction from very much within my body. So this process of feeling the movement, not working from the outside in, which is really how we start to experience it, because necessarily we don't know what's going on within the body. So we follow the movements that we see. But eventually, as we become more familiar with a particular movement or a set of movements, we feel it more the other way around. So moving your hands around as though you're cradling the ball. In a little sequence, feeling the changes within the body from one movement to another, particularly within your upper body. From hips down to feet, it's the same for each exercise. Going into the wild goose. And then parting the clouds. It's not just a physical change. It's a change in your awareness. It could be the image or just an awareness of what we might think of as the shape, the feel of the exercise. That, you know, with that, a lot would depend on how familiar you are with the exercise, which is why I'm doing it now with this very simple set. Very familiar exercises to you all. But it's something that can occur in all of the movements, seated and standing. You could argue that each exercise has a particular shape that encompasses the qualities of that exercise. And when we know that, when we're familiar with that, then when we change to that particular exercise, so when we, for instance, change from the wild goose to parting the clouds, it's a change in our intent. So it's as much mind as it is body. One more round. This too helps to develop the flow of the movement. And then shake out. This is very common, by the way. We do this all the time. If you're walking down the road and there's somebody on the other side of the road, you go, "Oh, hi there." You recognise them, and you might recognise them by their face or something like that, but you might not see their face. And quite often, you kind of recognise them just because you recognise them. There's any number of factors that feed into that shape. If you're going to do something at home, you're going to I don't know, put the kettle on, or you're going to get the vacuum cleaner, or whatever. Then there's a certain shape that action has. You know where the vacuum cleaner is kept. You know where the cupboard is, or whatever. And we know that that's true because if we go to the place where the vacuum cleaner is kept and it's not there, we're like, oh, hold on, why isn't the vacuum? It's a bit of a shock. So we have these, what I've referred to as shapes, for want of a better term, in all sorts of ways. And you know, our actions are in some senses focused through them. So the shape now is the classic bow stance. Feet hip width apart, about the same in length, and part of the shape is the action of transferring your weight from one foot to another. Most tasks that we undertake regularly become easier and often quicker. We don't want to go quicker in Tai Chi, but they also become, the effort that we make to do them changes. It's the first time you kind of like use the vacuum cleaner, you have to think about it. Whereas if you're used to using it, you might be having a chat with somebody at the same time. And then raising your toes and your heel. And we're capable of quite subtle actions. The example I sometimes give to people is threading a needle. I mean, I use a needle threader. If I don't use a needle thread, it can take me half an hour to thread a needle. But I've seen people who sew regularly just go, oh yeah, there you go, the needle is threaded. So that shape of the movement that we focus our intent with actually is capable of getting us to produce quite subtle operations. Stepping in. And then on the other side. We don't want those shapes to become solid. So within them, when we do Tai Chi, there should be a certain fluidity. We don't want this to always feel the same. We want to be open to the changes as we develop. And then raising your toes and your heel. If you want to get an idea of how the shape or the feel of this movement can change, don't do it outside on a slightly uneven surface, for instance. And what that would do, it will guide you into what is actually crucial about the movement, the sort of center of the shape, as it were, rather than just its external form. And then just stepping in. In the same way that, you know, that person on the other side of the road, if you know them well, you have a sense for how they're doing, for their mood or whatever. If you don't know them that well, it's hard to do that. Let's step through. And then, and what we find is those qualities that are right at the heart of each movement. So the things that are important, say during the step-in, are also the things that are important for all of the exercises. Shake out. Have your right foot forwards. Fisherman cast the net. The ability of, say, the center of your body to adjust the movement. The feeling through your back and your arms, shoulders, as your arms move away from and back towards your body. Transfer of the weight itself. And eventually these qualities become very, very embodied. And when that happens, that's when we start to notice them outside of just doing Tai Chi. They're transferable, shall we say. Similarly, the sort of the quietness, the stillness that we experience in the mind is itself, if you like, a shape, a pattern, if you like. So then into the figure of eight movement. Physical change is just the turning of the center. We have that image there of the infinity sign or the figure of eight, and yet at one and the same time, still, you know, aware of the simple transfer of the weight, and it changes in the center of the body, so on and so forth. Good. On the other side, fisherman cast the net. And then turn in. As I say, don't get fixed about this is what always happens. Because the process of getting to them can change. Everything changes. I mean, one of the reasons we're doing Tai Chi is to, I suppose, in a way, change how we're moving to sort of grow through that movement. I have to find a balance there between some kind of constancy, but not that becoming rigid and concrete. Now just turn your front foot out a little bit, going forwards and stepping through. And then changing direction. And repeat that. Lovely. Go back to your chair. Okay. Once again, feet down, sitting comfortably in your chair, hands down to your side. And embrace tiger, return to mountain. The shape this time, the intent this time is to really emphasize that sense of settling. One more time. And rest. And open your eyes. Thank you very much, everybody. So enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Enjoy your walk, Sarah.